Greetings. This is Walter D. Donnie Kennedy. I'm Chief of Heritage Operations for the Sons of Confederate Veterans, and this is the March issue of Commander's Comment. We have with us today, as usual, our Commander-in-Chief of the Sons of Confederate Veterans, Paul Grambling Jr. Paul, it's good to have you.
Hello, Donnie. Good to be with you again.
On this issue of Commander's Comment, it's going to be a two-part issue, and one part will be covering our Stone Mountain event and the memorial at Stone Mountain, Georgia. And the second portion, another 10-minute section, will cover events going on in the Confederation in general, the Sons of Confederate Veterans Confederation. Paul, the Stone Mountain Monument has been in the news quite a bit here recently, but a lot of people may not realize just how large that monument is. The surface area on that monument itself covers over 1.5 acres. Just think about that. That's the surface area. It's a stone carving of President Jefferson Davis, General Robert E. Lee, and General Stonewall Jackson. 1.5 acres. Now, a little bit of factoid that a lot of people may be shocked to find out. In 1925, the U.S. Mint issued a commemorative silver dollar, half silver dollar, of Stone Mountain as a fundraiser to get that monument established. Now, this commemorative coin from the U.S. Mint was approved by the federal U.S. Congress, and it was signed by the president at that time, Calvin Coolidge. Paul, the mountain itself is beautiful, but I understand that we're going to have a memorial service there coming up in April, I believe. Is that correct? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
We are. The Georgia Division, Sons of Confederate Veterans, every year they have a Confederate memorial service there at Stone Mountain. In front of the mountain and the pond that's in front of the carvings there. So this year we're making it an annual event because I think it's important that we as Southerners stand up for what almost happened last year in Georgia. You know, there was a particular person running for governor last year that campaigned on sandblasting Stone Mountain. Now, Stone Mountain Park is a state park in Georgia. So, and they have laws against, defacing monuments and what have you, but this particular candidate campaigned on sandblasting Stone Mountain. And what worries me about that is that 48% of the people voted for this candidate. So it got to come to our attention, we need to make a stand.
Correct.
And Stone Mountain, and I've made a proclamation and declared that Stone Mountain, this annual Confederate Memorial Service, was going to be a national event. And so we are pushing this on the national level, not just our friends and members from Georgia, but from all over the Confederation and beyond, to make a trek. Take a trip to Stone Mountain on April 6th, and we're going to have a great time at Stone Mountain. It's going to be kind of like a picnic atmosphere. There's going to be some music, there'll be some gospel music, bluegrass music, a couple of speeches, but for the most part, it's going to be a time where the parents and grandparents can bring their kids and just have a good time in a picnic atmosphere. But it's going to be a statement to show that our detractors, that we do care. And we are going to stand to make sure that nothing happens to this monument. Is the biggest monument, the largest monument of any size that we have here in the South. And we must do everything we can to protect that and other monuments as well throughout the South. This is going to be a show of force that we care not only for this monument, but for every monument dedicated to the South and the Confederate dead that never made it home.
One of the problems I think we have, Paul, in that people don't realize who these gentlemen are that we are looking at on Stone Mountain. For instance, Robert E. Lee. Robert E. Lee was the son of a Revolutionary War hero. His father, Light Horse Harry Lee, was George Washington's chief of cavalry. he was a man, Robert E. Lee's son, was the man that gave the eulogy to Washington that became famous worldwide. First in war, first in peace, and first in the hearts of his countrymen. That was Robert E. Lee's father that said that. Robert E. Lee was a gentleman of high proportion. Is that not correct?
That's true. He made his comments at the eulogy of George Washington and his funeral.
Right.
And he also, in 1829, graduated second in his class at West Point, and even though it's a well-known fact, but there's others that may not know that he graduated without a single demerit.
Absolutely.
And as far as I know, I don't know if that's happened since then.
I don't think so. He served in the Mexican War. I think General Scott during the Mexican War declared that he was the very best soldier that he had ever seen. He was appointed as superintendent of West Point Military Academy. He wasn't in favor of secession, as most are. Jefferson Davis wasn't either, but he believed that the federal government did not have the right to wage war on the states, so he sided with the states instead of the federal government. So,
and, in his military campaigns, they're still studied by war colleges all over, worldwide. And he was viewed as a leader, kind of like Alexander the Great and Napoleon. His tactics were so great, like I said, they're still studying them today.
Yeah. I think one of the most interesting things about Lee was his Christian character. I remember being told of the story that Lee, in his latter part of his life, he once said, and this is a man that's been praised by so many people, but yet he said, "I am nothing but a poor lost sinner trusting in Christ only for salvation." And that was Robert E. Lee, but we also had Jefferson Davis on that monument too, and we honor Jefferson Davis. He was the son of a Revolutionary War hero. Again, he was born in Kentucky. Jefferson Davis was born in Kentucky. Interestingly enough, within 100 miles of where Abraham Lincoln was born. They were both born in Kentucky. Right. He was a graduate of the U.S. Military Academy, married Sarah Knox Taylor. And what about Sarah Knox Taylor?
Sarah Knox Taylor was the sister to Richard Taylor, who was the General Richard Taylor from Louisiana. Absolutely. Which happens to be my SEV camp namesake in Shreveport, Louisiana.
And that's Zachary Taylor's daughter, who was later president of the U.S., the United States. So it's a big connection there. One of the things I really noted about Jefferson Davis when I was doing research on him was the love and respect that the slaves that he owned had for him. At his funeral, and this was when was his funeral? Was it in 1889, I believe you're right. The old slaves, the old servants came to his funeral, and here was a quotation from one of them I've got to tell you. He said, and this came from one of his old servants. He said, "We, the old servants and tenants of our beloved master, Honorable Jefferson Davis, have cause to mingle our tears over his death, who was always so kind and so thoughtful of our peace and happiness. We extend to you our humble sympathy," end quote. This shows how Davis was really a progressive man who sought to end slavery, of what he called using the high road of emancipation, bringing the slaves up to the educational level of the other free people, and therefore, he said, making them fit for freedom and unfit for slavery. Jefferson Davis was a very, very interesting man. Also, Stonewall Jackson is on there. Tell us a little bit about Stonewall Jackson.
Well, of course, we all know Stonewall Jackson, nicknamed Stonewall, came from the Battle of First Manassas.
Exactly.
And when his men were protecting or holding their stance during the battle, he was commented from another general across the battlefield, said, "Look at General Jackson. He stands there like a stone wall." And that name kind of stuck with him ever since then.
That's right. And Stonewall Jackson was another great Christian. And not only was he a Christian, he was a Christian that promoted, again, like Jefferson Davis, the education of black people, black children, especially.
He taught Sunday school.
Exactly.
Blacks in Sunday school.
And there is a church in the valley, the Shenandoah Valley, a black church with a mural of Stonewall Jackson, dedicated to Stonewall Jackson, because they are the descendants of those children that Jackson taught so well. So this is what we're looking at. We're memorializing in Stone Mountain, and we want everyone to come out and help us memorialize these great Americans, not just Southerners, but great Americans who fought for freedom, our freedom, during the War for Southern Independence. And we're just about to run out of time, Paul, on this half, and we'll come back on the second portion of Commander's Comment, this March edition of Commander's Comment, shortly.
Friends, please spread the word about the Stone Mountain Rally this coming April 6, 2019. Download the flyer at makedixiegreatagain.org. A big crowd will show the politicians that the public supports America's Confederate monuments, especially the one at Stone Mountain, Georgia. Now, last month I showed you the January 14, 2019 edition of Jackson, Mississippi's Clarion Ledger. Let's look at it again. It quotes left-wing leaders who are literally declaring war on the Confederacy. These leftists say, we cannot have a united country until we remove the symbols that divide this country. These statements follow a long-established pattern of Marxist agitation combined with propaganda, known as agitprop. These people will wage war, a psychological war aimed at the American public with the goal of creating overwhelming hatred of the Confederacy, its symbols, and eventually its supporters. That's you and me. In all wars, there are at least two opposing sides. We know who is on the left. We're on the right. We are in the right. To win this war, we need to join the Confederate Legion and follow the Southern Victory Campaign plan of the Sons of Confederate Veterans. And we need to be at the Stone Mountain Rally on April the 6th. So go to makedixiegreatagain.org and join the growing offensive. Now be sure to watch part 2 of this March edition of Commander's Comments. Until then, I'm S. Ross Aldridge. Thank you for watching, and have a Dixie Day.